Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be reflecting on a positive performance, I would say, Craig. A positive performance up at Manchester City on the weekend. Obviously, we run out 2-1 losers on the day, but just from the discourse that I've been looking at over the last couple of days and from being there as well, it was definitely a positive one. I'm in an unfamiliar surroundings. I'm actually at work at the moment, so I'm doing a pod from a pod at work. Look at that, Craig. I like that.
I'm doing it from work as well.
So, different surroundings this week. How are we doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm very good. And like you said, taking a lot of positives from what seems like a negative result, but it's not.
No, really, really, really good performance. So we'll get into that. Just before we get going, remember to comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Eden Road on Twitter and at Eden Road Pod on Instagram. Let's start with Tweet of the Week, Craig, because there was no negative tweets this week, which I found quite refreshing. None of the usual suspects out and about. But I am going to start with a tweet from City Extra, and it involves Thomas Frank and Pep Guardiola and what Pep Guardiola said after the game. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion around that, because it was really nice to see Thomas Frank getting some praise, but a little bit too nice for my liking. But anyway, this is what Pep Guardiola said and what City Extra tweeted out. They're good in high pressing. They're good in long balls, second balls. They defend deep, so compact, allowing them to go outside and have spaces inside. The transitions with Wissa and Mbumo, really, really good. This season, even when they're making high pressing, last season it was long balls to Tony. This season, no. They play short passes, they break, they move inside, outside. They're so quick. Set pieces, every corner is a headache, every throw-in, every free kick, every department, and all the things they do, they have a manager behind, and it's a good manager. Sometimes you see a team, and sometimes it's whatever happens. What they always do, it makes sense. Thomas Frank is one of the best. One of the best, Craig.
One of the best. The best. Not even one of the best. Pep Guardiola's got pictures of Thomas Frank on his bedroom wall.
He must do. I've never heard such, because Pep does this quite a lot, and it's normally in the build-up to games when he'll build a team up and really compliment them. And that's when you know that they're about to get spanked. Yeah. I don't really see it too often from Pep in post-match. So as I touched on at the start, obviously it's nice to see Thomas Frank getting the praise that he deserves. And with all the links that he had over the summer, I've been on podcasts, I'm sure you've been on podcasts as well, or just even the reaction to Thomas Frank being linked to the United job or the Chelsea job, for example. You see a lot of Chelsea and United fans in the replies saying, well, Thomas Frank, he's too defensive, 5 at the back, 16th in the league. And obviously that kind of analysis comes from a typical Big Six fan who doesn't watch games outside of the Big Six. But maybe too nice for me, Craig. I didn't like how nice he was.
Well, do you know, it's the other end of the spectrum of what we normally get, isn't it? But you got to be honest, even when we used to play Liverpool when Klopp was there, he would be very complimentary of our playing style. It's the Big Six managers that seem to like the way we play, and Thomas Frank, but everyone else around us doesn't like us. So maybe it's the Big Seven now.
I mean, with how well some of the teams around us have started, i.e. Forest, I don't like how they've started this season one bit, considering we both tipped them to go down before the start of the season. Yeah. But it's nice to get the praise. I like Thomas Frank getting that kind of praise from a manager, especially who a lot of people would consider the best, if not one of the best managers of all time. And he was kind of touting him for a move. It's only a matter of time, I think he said in another quote. So whilst I like the praise, Pep, please fucking stop.
That's right. When Thomas Frank goes, we'll take Pep.
Yeah, exactly that. Right, let's kick on. Let's get on to City. I was going to mention as well, there was an article on Twitter that a guy called @Marshall released on his Medium account, and I'm not sure if you've read it, but I read the whole thing, and I'm sure a lot of Brentford fans did as well, because it was a big, long read on Brentford from a neutral's perspective, kind of similar to what we did with John on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. So if you haven't checked that one out already, go back and listen to that, because it was really good. The feedback's been really good on that one as well. But I wanted to touch on that, and I'll kind of weave it into some of the stuff we talk about. But it was nice to see what other people who don't support Brentford, but clearly have taken an interest in how we operate and the players that we have, as opposed to kind of your standard shit analysis from top six sides, from fans of top six sides. So if you haven't already, go check that out, and I'll be talking about it kind of periodically throughout this pod. But City, Craig, what a start. Earliest goal conceded by defending champions in Premier League history. How's that?
Have we scored a quicker goal in the Premier League than that? Or is that our quickest goal in the Premier League and it's come away at Manchester City?
I'm not sure about Premier League, but I want to say Sergi Canos' goal against Huddersfield in the Championship was quite quick. But I don't know. It could be. Could be. We need someone to tell us in the comments.
We need fact checking. So that could be our quickest Premier League goal, and it came away at Manchester City. Wait, what a start! Wait, you got to think. Get in front early against Man City, and the problem is you're worried that they're just going to then turn it around like they did against Ipswich, and next thing you know, you're 3-4-1 down. But it just never happened. And we always go there and did a podcast with Manchester City with David Mooney, which was really good as well. And we was talking about the games that we have when we play Manchester City and how they're always tight games. And you mentioned the 3-1 game at the GTEC last season when we went 1-0 up and Flecken had a masterclass that game, just saving everything that went towards him, and said we kind of ran away with it in the end. But I don't think even then they ran away with it at 3-1.
Mm-hmm.
We just seem to do well against Manchester City. Thomas Frank seems to have their number. It's just the talent that they've got and what they can do on the ball and on the pitch, which means they can turn it around in the way they did.
I think you mentioned Flecken there. We'll get onto Flecken, but I do like at the end you said about Thomas Frank. He's got City's number. he does have their number in a way. I mean, a couple of seasons ago he did the double over them, so he's definitely got their number that season.
Yeah.
But he always says in his pre-match like press conferences, interviews, whatever, that whenever we go to City or whenever we play City, he always wants to win. It's never let's sit back and kind of maybe consign ourselves to a defeat. And I know you can't really have that mindset ever, but he's always going into the game with a positive mindset, thinking that if you get a bit of luck and if you play to the absolute top of your game, like we did on two occasions a couple of seasons ago, then there's every chance that we can win. And, you know, following that early goal, we had chances from Brian, which I'm kind of in two minds about. I feel like the Damsgaard pass probably could have been a little bit heavier, and Brian's first touch could have been a little bit better. And then the Collins chance as well. I think I tweeted out to say it was the best we've played since City away in 2022. But really, I think you need to be tucking those chances away. I think Thomas Frank said that in his post-match if you want to come away with something.
Yeah, you don't get across very many players like Rico Lewis as well who can match Brian Obama for pace in the way that he does, because he was so quick off the mark. Like you said, that ball from Damsgaard, and Brian tries to bring it down, but as soon as he tries to bring it down, Rico Lewis is just there, you know. And like his namesake, Rico Henry is that player that we rely on when he plays, and that's what he would have done in that scenario as well. The Collins one, I think it's kind of like a snapshot. It's a bit difficult to say he should be scoring, but I mean, Ederson does well as well to react well and keep the ball out, but it's such a quick snapshot that he just flings a leg at it and it's driven low towards, and you know, like you say, a foot either side, and it's 2-0, isn't it? It's a completely different game then. But yeah, I mean, you say about Thomas Frank saying that we want to go there and win, and that's just shown by the high press that we did as well, which leaves us vulnerable. And I know we're going to go on to it in a moment, but those that watch Match of the Day as well in the evening, they highlighted the press that we did. But when they're playing out from the back, we're going 5-on-5. We're absolutely pressing outside their own penalty area. But when we do that, it leaves us susceptible to that long ball, in which we got done with this weekend as well.
You mentioned that press though, and do you remember when we spoke about it a couple of pods ago about sometimes the only criticism or the only frustration with Frank is going to big teams and putting a high press on? But at Liverpool, we didn't do that. Whereas at City, it was like we were really pressed up high up the pitch. In those first like 25 minutes, we pressed up high. We were amazing in transitions. I think someone told me, I'm not sure if it was you or maybe my cousin said, we had like 75% possession in the first 15 minutes, something like that. And that was a lot of it was down to the turnovers that we were making, recycling the ball back in. So yeah, it was weird to see I don't know what Thomas Frank's thought process was. Maybe he thinks that Arne Slot's team were better with the ball than Man City are at the moment. But I mean, either way, it made for just an unbelievable first like 20 minutes. We were kind of scratching our heads thinking maybe this could happen again. But
I posted a tweet as a little bit of a jokey tweet as well, a snapshot of Man City 0 Brentford 1. I think it was after about 15 minutes They hadn't had a shot after 15 minutes. We'd had 73% of the ball, and just put a little bit of a jokey bit as which of these has won the last 4 Premier Leagues.
No, bang on though. Can't believe that. That must be like the first time a team has gone to Man City and had that much possession in the first 15 minutes of the game. But you mentioned like because the high press was susceptible to being hit on the break. I think the first Haaland one is slightly unlucky. The deflection kind of just takes it past Flecken. Although I do think Wissa could have been better in the build up to that goal. I was watching Match of the Day, but I think I might watch the match back again on the Brentford website for a YouTube video on my channel, which if you haven't subscribed to already, sorry to do this, Craig, in the middle of the pod, but if you haven't subscribed to already, Mike Live and 5 on YouTube, weekly Brentford content to come on there. But Wissa, I think for me, could do better in the press. He thinks he's just a touch lazy, and he kind of gets away from Gundogan. But the second, I'm in two minds about it, Craig, because at the time I thought it was poor from Ethan, but watching it back, I think it's really, really clever from Haaland. How do you see the second?
I'm with the latter, mate. I think it's incredibly clever. An incredibly clever goal. But it also shows up the versatility of Manchester City as well, because they were playing out the way they normally do. Ederson was being used as an outfield player because he's just so good with his distribution with his feet, in which Mark Flecken is this season, David Raya was last season. Season before anyway. So he is used as an outfield player. But that also means that he can put a long ball in as well. He could put the ball long. So they could obviously identify that we was pressing them really high. But pressing them really high means that we leave the striker, Erling Haaland, of all players as well, one-on-one with Ethan Pinnock. And he's so smart in the run that he makes. He starts his run in his half, for starters. He starts the run in his half. And as the flight of the ball is held up in the air, he gets goal side of Ethan Pinnock. And he doesn't have to do a lot, because all he does is stops or slows down ever so slightly. So there's just a little bit of contact, but it's never going to be a foul. It's just a little bit of contact, which completely takes Ethan Pinnock out of the game. And then he's one-on-one with Mark Flecken. And, you know, you put a player like Erling Haaland through like that, you really do put a lot of money on him to put the ball in the back of the net, which he did. But incredibly smart forward play for me.
I think I felt sorry for Pinnock because obviously the only stat that matters is the 2 goals that Haaland scored. But I actually think he did an incredibly good job of containing him. There was a few moments in the second half, especially, where Ederson did the same thing, hoofed it long. And because there was so much space, or because we were leaving Haaland one-on-one with Pinnock, there were so many times where Pinnock actually got the better of that duel. But the 2 times that it counted, or the 1 time that it counted on Pinnock's side, is the goal. So I felt sorry for him in that sense, but definitely, like, Haaland's, he's just a freak, mate, an absolute freak. I don't think you can defend against him. I mean, last season he scored 30 goals. People were saying he wasn't as good as the year before, and this season he's already scored 9. He's like, they were chanting at us, the City fans, the people that were at the game, they were chanting at us. Erling Haaland, he scored more than you, and it's just like, what can you even reply to that? There's nothing you can say. It's just ridiculous. It's just insane. But anyway, let's talk about the Wissa injury and what I have looked back on several times now. I can see why people are maybe suggesting that it could have been a red card, but for me, I don't think there's enough. If he catched him a bit higher, I think it's a red. But there's loads of talk, especially on Twitter and the GPG. The GPG were fixated on it after the game. But what was your take on that and the injury as well? What ramifications that could have?
Well, the instant ramification is Kevin Sharda's going to get a lot more minutes now, isn't he? He's going to be playing a lot more football. And also Keane Lewis-Potter as well is going to be involved a lot more. Because if we're going to play a 2, let's say Spurs next week, which I know we're going to go on to, let's say we play with the front 2, the likelihood is now that's Brian Mbeumo and Kevin Sharda. So that's one thing is, thankfully, we have a replacement. But Yoane Wissa is an incredibly big, going to be an incredibly big miss for us, I think, if he is out long term. But he was used in the promo for the Leyton Orient game, which leaves a little bit of hope in me that maybe it's not as bad as we think. In my opinion, it's just an incredibly unnecessary challenge. Go through the back of a player when it's what was it? It's like the 35th, 40th minute as well. I was right on the stroke of half time, wasn't it? Like right on the stroke of half time, and you're going through the back of a player like that. It's just completely unnecessary. And I hope to God that Wissa is okay. For starters, he obviously limped off very, very much off the pitch, and I just hope that it's not as bad as it first looked. As a Brentford fan, I'm screaming for a red card. As a football fan, he gets a touch on the ball, so technically he wins it, but he goes through the back of the player, so it should have been a booking. Yeah.
I think the big ramification, and I was going to touch on this a little bit later, but with Sharda coming in, and I feel like that is the point the game kind of turned and City started to get away from us a little bit, because Wissa's hold-up play is not on a par with Tony's, but it's a different kind of hold-up play. He likes to come deep. He likes to get on the half-turn, and that kind of quick burst acceleration can get him past the first man. And then suddenly, as we've spoken about on the pod before, when you've got that front three, we're almost in a 3v3 immediately. But Sharda, and he's fantastic. And I don't think we played to his strengths in that second half. And I feel like that's maybe a criticism I can level at Thomas Frank potentially, just because Sharda, you want to get him in those isolated 1v1s where he can stretch his legs and get past people, but we tried to play him like Wissa, and I don't think he can do that as well as Wissa. I've not seen any evidence to suggest that he can. So going forward, I'm praying that Wissa injury isn't as bad as it looked, because especially setting up against the big six when we're in a back five and we've got only two kind of outlets in Mbumo or Wissa and Sharda. That's going to make us suffer, especially in those games, because his hold-up play is not on Wissa's level. But we talked about the second half. There's kind of a couple of chances. There's a couple of chances for City. Haaland hits the woodwork. Savinho has one that he probably should score. But we stayed in the game, and then once you stay in the game for that long, your hope just goes up and up and up. Yeah. And then there's a couple of chances towards the end of the second half. Yarmo has an effort, who I thought was really good when he came on, by the way. Yarmo has an effort that he kind of scuffs into the ground that kind of trickles just wide of the post. But there's also a bit where we turn the ball over quite high up. I think Sharda wins it potentially. Or maybe that's Yarmo's effort. But anyway, I think Damsgaard has the ball, and there's a chance to feed Carvalho, who again was really, really good when he came on. But it was just we lose 2-1. The performance was incredible, I thought, to stay in the game for that long, especially in that first half, but to stay in the game for that long in the second half, to not concede. And a big part of that is down to Mark Flecken, which is a nice segue into talking about some of the players. We'll start off with Flecken, because I just think his composure, especially playing out from the back when City were kind of playing a high press, and the saves that he was making. I'll hand over to you, because I know you're Flecken's biggest fan. So you take Flecken. You take some Flecken praise.
I think that this season he's finally come into his own, because last season, even up to the Man City game and afterwards, when he had that masterclass, then what was that, 10, 12, 15 games before the end of the season, and those last 15 games we were singing his praises up until the end. And there were notable moments in them as well, like the Man City game, like the save he made at Wolves, like the save he made at the start of the season against Crystal Palace. And these are now match-winning saves, which is what we were saying he was lacking from his game last season. And he had to show his value by winning us points, which he is doing now, thankfully. But by doing, on the other end of the side of that as well, he's also keeping our goal difference down a little bit, because City can turn the team over. We've seen them do it 3 out of 4 times already this season. You know, we've seen Haaland score 9 goals already this season, and I'm just so glad that he's finally coming into his own and getting the respect in which he deserves. There are still a few people out there that like to pick on him, but that's just because someone has to take the blame for something, don't they? And they can't blame their favourite players, so the scapegoat gets it. And there's always a scapegoat in the team. But there are things in his game in which we still compare to David Raya, and maybe that's like command in the box and aerial discipline and things like that. But he is, I'm going to say this, and people probably won't agree with me, he is just as good, if not better than Raya distribution-wise, with his feet. Yeah. With his feet. when the ball was at his feet, even when he slipped over last season against West Ham, he got up and made the pass. And I still, even when he fell over, I still had no doubt that the pass was going to get made. It was a bit of a, head in hands, heart jumping out at the moment. But I still think that he is one of our most comfortable players with the ball at his feet. And we spoke about when we did the quiz, I don't know if you remember, I was telling you loads of different questions, and I said to you, which Brentford player carried the ball the most yards of last season? And it was Mark Flecken. He progressed the ball the most last season with the ball at his feet, by the way, not just kicking it long, just having the ball in his 6-yard box and taking it 20 yards. He did it so many times last season that he had the most carries. I'm just so glad that he's finally getting his dues. He looks confident as well, and he's playing like it. So long may that continue.
100%. I think one person that would disagree with you there, and I remember I mentioned that article at the top of the show, but Marshall on Twitter, at Marshall with a 4 is the A for people that want to read the article. He, in that long read, suggested what he said, that not replacing David Raya adequately with someone like Mark Flecken is one of the reasons why Brentford haven't progressed as much. He actually labelled Mark Flecken as one of the bottom 3 keepers in the league. And fair enough before the City game last season, because he wasn't looking confident. Saves were going past him. He probably wasn't even as confident with the ball at his feet. But now, from what we've seen this season, I would probably go as far to say that Flecken and Collins have been our 2 best players so far, and obviously Brian and Bumo. But defensive wise, I'd go as far to say that. And staying on the defense, so that was another point of contention in the article. But staying on the defense, I thought Collins, Sepp van den Berg, and Ethan Pinnock were all incredibly comfortable on the ball, especially Van den Berg coming into his first game against Man City. I mentioned in the immediate reaction video that we haven't really had the chance to kind of get a proper look at him because with it being Colchester, it's difficult. But I thought it was a really, really good debut from him. He looked so comfortable in possession. I think Brentford posted some tats about the duels that he won and the amount of blocks that he made. But Collins is having just an unreal season so far. Yeah. And I loved it. His post-match interview, he looks so pissed off that we hadn't come away from the game with any points, because he's been fantastic so far. So we'll move on to, I want to talk a little bit about Yoane, because I didn't mention it in the immediate post-match, and I wanted to mention it, but I just completely forgot, like an idiot. But Yoane, for me, we've had the conversation many times on the pod before about where he fits into the team, if he's good to have around, and we kind of have all agreed. I think he's a fantastic squad player to have, and with him, you know what you're going to get. He's very steady. But I felt in that game in particular, I would have loved to have seen either Carvalho come on earlier or Carvalho start, because I felt like Carvalho did more in that game in the little time that he had than Yoane actually did in the whole game. There were so many instances, and I love the guy to bits, but just sometimes with the ball at his feet in tight, pressurized situations, he would just kick it away and it would just give possession straight back. And it happened so many times in that second half where Yoane would pick up the ball, he'd either win the ball or it would break to him out of a loose one, and he'd just kick it straight back into touch, or he'd kick it out to their defence and then they're attacking us again. Carvalho against Orient, maybe? Definitely.
Oh, definitely. 100%. 100%. Look, we spoke about Yoane so many times already this season. We spoke about him, I think it was the Southampton game, or it might have been the Palace game, where he's putting the goalkeeper under unnecessary pressure as well. He's putting him under unnecessary pressure. Absolutely great squad player, but I think that now's the time that we start to see players like Carvalho, even Yoane starting a few games as well. He's got the experience in the minutes under his belt from last season. Give him a chance. He seems like a good enough player. We just need to see it, Need to see it.
Well, that's a good segue, because we speak about the players that we want to see. We're recording this on Monday, so we've got Orient on Tuesday. In terms of the people that obviously we think will feature, Van den Berg, Carvalho, Yoane, I'd probably expect Sharda to play, considering Wissa's injury. But I think it's a great draw. I think it's a great draw to get. In terms of being at home playing against a team like Orient.
Orient,
it's a great draw to get, and it's a good chance to get into the next round. But Yes, teams like Brentford and teams like, I feel like I can say that now because we're in the Premier League. But how are you? How are you feeling ahead of Orient? And then we'll chat about Spurs.
So I will be there tomorrow night, down at the G-Tech under the lights. You can't go wrong with that sometimes, can you? Yeah, Valdemarson obviously is going to play in goal, but I would like to see Fab start. I would like to see Van der Beek start as well again, even though he did just play up at City. Yeah, get Yarmo some minutes, and I imagine we'd see players like Jisoo and Trev Hit and whatnot as well. So it's a great draw for us, but the way that we know what Brentford are like in cup competitions, we can't go in this thinking we're going to win it, because I've seen us get knocked out by, Gillingham, but I've also seen us put 7 past Oldham. So you really don't know which Brentford you're going to get. So I just hope that that we go out there with the right attitude, and the players that we put out should be enough to beat them. So let's get through to the next round.
On to Spurs. I think Collins's post-match comments about the Man City performance being the bar for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
If we, and this is going to have to be short because my laptop is very, very soon to die and I don't have a charger, but if we play like we did against City, what is stopping us, especially in those first 25 minutes, what is stopping us from going out and beating Spurs next week?
I'll keep it short and sweet for you. Nothing.
Okay. And then one last thing that I wanted to say, because this isn't going to be a proper Spurs preview, but don't worry, there'll be another one out about that. I think with the way that we pressed against City, if we do that against Spurs, we know that they're a bit susceptible to that at the back. We do that against United the following week, or in a couple of weeks, whenever it is. I really do think the signs this season, and it's very much dependent on me if or how long Wissa is out for, but the signs so far this season have been really, really positive. I think 2 wins and 2 losses from 4 games, with the losses coming against the 2 title challengers from last season, is nothing to be ashamed about. And in both games against those teams in the top 6, in Liverpool and Man City, we have not been out of them by any stretch of the imagination, and we've had chances in both. So, final thoughts heading into Orient and Spurs, Craig?
I'm more worried about losing to Orient than I am losing to Spurs. So let's go with that one.
Perfect.
I think if we do press Spurs, their high line could be in danger with the pace of Brian, the pace of Kevin Sharda, and I do think we could see KLB feature as part of that front three. And I think we'll give them as much of a run for their money as we have done for Man City and Liverpool. And like I say, what's stopping us from going there and beating them? Absolutely nothing.
Good stuff, mate. Good stuff. I think that'll be a good point to round up the podcast. We'll be back in midweek with a Spurs preview. I'm going to reach out to Flav, so hopefully that'll be a good one. I think the last one was really good that we did together. So we'll be back at some point in the week. Keep your eyes peeled across the socials for that. In the meantime, drop a comment down below. How did you rate the performance against City? Haaland's second goal, how do you see it? Was it Pinnock's error or Haaland's brilliance? What was your thoughts on the day? What was your thoughts on the performance? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on our socials. That's at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Craig, an absolute pleasure as always, mate.
Up the bees.